That's important for two reasons. Let me set this up. I'll tell you two things I bet you don't know. First of all, today in America, there are 3 million posted job openings. People who could be hired tomorrow morning if they were hired. That is, no bank has to loan anybody money. We don't have to get anybody to come here. If we just filled all the posted job openings, the unemployment rate in the United States would drop 2%, and we'd be living in a different world. Now, the reason that they're not being hired, well, some of it's a mortgage crisis, because more than 10 million of us are living in houses not worth as much as a mortgage. And we can't move like we normally do because we credit to be toast for a decade. But the big reason is a skills differential between those who apply for the jobs and what the jobs require. For example, suppose in 10 miles from Albuquerque, there's a person running a little plant and wants to hire 10 tool and die workers. Maybe 1,000 people that apply for those 10 jobs, but only 2 of them have the requisite skills. Now, why is that important? Because if the federal government would send every month to the governor of New Mexico, who understood how to do it, training funds just to train people for the jobs that have been open more than 3 weeks in New Mexico. Just those. And then you could give it to community colleges or to the employers themselves and other training programs, and you wouldn't have this problem. We could make this problem go away in 6 months. It'd be over. Now, who's more likely to do that? There's only one candidate you can vote for who's got any kind of record in education and training, who expanded pre-kindergarten programs across the state, worked on increasing the graduation rates for all groups of New Mexican kids, got funding to connect local farmers with schools to have healthier children in school who have fresh produce available. Her opponent's education program, nearly as I can see, is to give vouchers for people to go to private schools that still would require them to have to pay tuition. So most of your kids won't be able to afford to go even with the vouchers. And I can tell you what it does. In a tough economic time, when you've got enough budget problems, it's like saying, we're going to cut the schools even more, we're going to have bigger class sizes and more poorly paid teachers. I don't think that's a good recipe for a good education program. And it doesn't give you any extra money to train people with. So this is a big deal. I'll give you one other example. The United States dropped for the first time in my lifetime, that is literally for the first time since the GI Bill passed after World War II, we dropped from 1st to 9th in the world in the percentage of our young people with 4-year college degrees. And yet we're still first in the world in the percentage of our young people going to college. How come? Because people don't think they can afford to stay. Because the tax credits and the Pell Grants and the student loans have not kept up with rising costs, and because more and more families are afraid that the young people will never, ever be able to afford to repay the amount of money they would have to borrow to get them through to graduation. So the Congress just passed student loan reform. Hardly anybody knows about it. The Department of Education will give the money directly to New Mexico universities, and they will loan money to kids at lower interest rates, so it'll cost less to repay. And more important, listen to this, for the first time in the history of the country, every college graduate will be able to pay back their loans as a small fixed percentage of their income for up to 20 years, so not a single soul will ever again have to drop out of college. Now, anybody asks you why you're still a Democrat, tell them that. That one thing alone is enough. So one of the big issues in this election that nobody knows about is the Republicans have promised to repeal that student loan package. They want to make it more expensive to go to college and harder to repay the loans, and it adds $60 billion to the debt because we quit playing middlemen to do things that can be done more cheaply directly, and the middlemen are giving money to the Republicans and they want their $60 billion back. But what's the relevance to that to this? Nearly as I can see, in like I said, I was the governor for a dozen years, and I balanced a lot of budgets in horrible economies. She's promised to cut the state budget by 50%. Only way you can do that is to gut education and to gut Medicaid. And if you do it, then New Mexico will never be part of being first again in college graduates. New Mexico will never have the money we need to train people for those open jobs here. This is a huge deal. This is a huge deal. If we do this right, folks, we're going to come out of this miserable economy with a more modern, more highly paid, more sophisticated, more enduring economy than we went into it with. That's what we will do if we do it right. But if you want to catch up to the rest of the world, the worst thing you could do is to cut education by 50%. And you can hardly cut Medicaid by 50% as long as the insurance companies keep raising the rates and raising their profits and throwing people out of insurance and putting them back onto Medicaid. That's not just an idle talk, folks. Last year, in the depths of this recession, premiums went up through the roof. Insurance company profits went up 26%. 5.5 million Americans lost their health insurance, and 3 million of them, mostly working people and their kids, qualified for Medicaid. How in the world are we going to treat those kids if we cut it 50%? There are other ways to balance the budget. And so let's talk about that. There's only one candidate that's already cut government spending. There's only one candidate that's actually reformed any government agencies. There's only one candidate with an actual plan to cut $450 million through consolidations, reducing political appointees, better use of technology, and increasing investigation for fraud and abuse. There's only one. This is not a close question. What you should do if you want to educate and train people for the 21st century and have a responsible budget. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is this quality of life deal. There's a reason people keep showing up here. I remember the first time I saw Fred Harris, I've known for decades, but the first time I saw him in New Mexico, where we were down in southern New Mexico, you remember that? For the installation of a chancellor at New Mexico State who used to be at the University of Arkansas. This long before I was president. And there were 600 people in the crowd, and honest to goodness, 15% of them were from Arkansas. And I began to worry that everybody's going to leave home. There's a reason people come here. They like it here. And you can support a balanced, reasonable, sustainable lifestyle. Enter the Texas water controversy. Now, let me just talk a little about that. I feel bad about Texas being short of water. Really, I do. But you know, I don't feel so bad that I think they should have 2 governors and New Mexico none.